Hello everybody, how's it going? I'm the Tchenovstok. Hope you're all doing very well. Welcome back to the city of Tchenovstok in episode number 9 of the series. In today's episode, guys, we will be building the Tchenovstok Airbase. But it's not only going to be an Air Force base, there will be an attached, just general Army base. But a little later on in the series, maybe even next episode, I'm going to be building a passenger terminal in the airport. Well, it's going to be part of the airport. So with Tchenovstok being so remote, the easiest way to get to the city is by air travel, of course. And, with the air base being the only airport in the region, it's going to have to serve as both like a passenger airport and a military base. But they're going to be two separate terminals. They're not really going to interact with each other. So the military base is going to be totally separate. It's going to be blocked off by a sort of gate. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be like two different entities just sharing the same runway. So yeah, what I'm doing right now, guys, is I'm just going to create the connection to the airport that I just mentioned. Nothing too complicated. There was actually a highway that was part of the base map here, that's following the railroad tracks here. And at some point in time, I deleted some of the roads. I'm not sure if like this highway was linked to the other main roads of the map. I'm not really sure about that, but anyway, it wasn't a big job to reconnect them. As far as the railroads, I'm not really going to take advantage of the ones that were laid down previously. I don't know, I might like connect them to the airport at some point, but I don't really think that's necessary. I'm not even sure where those railroads will be going. But anyway, we already have our runway laid down and our main taxiways. The airbase will only have one runway, and one of the most important things about this build that I really want to capture is back in the Soviet days, a lot of the runways and airports in more remote areas were sort of in disrepair. So runways were patchy and full of potholes and, really falling into decay and disrepair. So a lot of Soviet planes had to be designed with that in mind, such as like the IL-86, many Antonov planes. They had to be designed a little bit more robust than a lot of Western planes of that era, due to the runways being in such poor condition. So, Tchenovstok is kind of the same thing. It's so remote, and upkeeping such a large airport in a remote area is super expensive, and at this point in time, the funds are better used elsewhere. So that's why I'm gonna make an effort to make this airport look a little rough. So where Tchenovstok's kind of a new city, it's like a brand new nuclear city. We can say that the airport was here way before that. We could say that it's even like an old World War II base. So for the next little while, I'm going to be detailing the runway markings. I'm not going to go as in-depth as I did in Timbuktu. In Timbuktu, we're really focused on the minute details in the airport. It took me like a few months to complete the Timbuktu airport. So I'm not going to go to that same extreme with this airport here. Like, I'm going to ignore a lot of like the taxiway signs and all of those little details. I still want it to look super realistic though. Obviously the runway markings are one of the most important aspects, in getting a runway to look like a runway. But yeah. But you'll see, like, I'm gonna cut a few corners here and there compared to Timbuktu's airport. But you'll see, guys, as this airbase develops, I'm actually really excited about how it turned out. It's the first time that I'm building anything like this. The only time that I've ever played around with any sort of military equipment in the game was in Timbuktu. We built a naval base near downtown. But other than that, I mean, I haven't played with any like military related props and buildings and things like that. I never built like a complete Air Force or Army base before. So this was kind of a challenge. And to add to that, I made an effort to make everything look as Soviet as I possibly could. For this build as well, it wasn't super straightforward. I had to do a little bit of shopping on the workshop, and a lot of the buildings that you see in this build are from completely different asset packs and prop packs and whatever the case may be. So I mean, you guys obviously notice like all the different barracks and hangars and all that. So it kind of makes it hard for me to tell you guys everything that I'm placing down right now. I'm not really sure where I found most of these buildings, honestly. Most of what I'm plopping down right now are just things that I found on the workshop as I was shopping for other things. I can say, however, most of the planes and helicopters that you're going to see in this episode are from the same creator. He goes by the name Guru on the workshop, and his creations are really, really great. It's kind of awesome that I didn't have any trouble finding Soviet airplanes on the workshop. Like, to my surprise, I mean, they were just there. Like, there was a whole bunch of choice. One thing that I probably should have done better, I'm not sure how well I did this in this build, guys, so let me know if you guys know a little bit about Soviet aviation. I didn't research at all like what type of airplane would have been flying in the Soviet Air Force in 1979. That's probably something that I should have researched, honestly, but some of these planes just look so cool, I just had to plop them down. But yeah, go check out Guru on the workshop. His assets are really great. You know, if ever you're finding yourself building a Soviet airport, these are definitely assets that you would want to check out. And to my surprise, like, I was surprised enough that these jets were super easy to find, but I was kind of surprised that a lot of other military equipment was super hard to find for a Soviet setting. So all of these trucks that I'm placing down right now are American. Unfortunately, like, I couldn't find any Soviet trucks and tanks and things like that. So there is a lot of American props on the workshop, so I had to resort to those for a lot of this build. If you're a military buff, you're probably going to be screaming at your screen right now saying, no, that's wrong. But I kind of didn't have a choice, and for me and for the untrained eye, I'm assuming that this whole thing would look just fine for most people. So moving on now, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the Air Force base, and I'm going to move on across the street into the General Army base. So for this, it's nothing really complicated. I think Army bases are pretty simple, really, for the most part, and this one is no exception. So it's basically going to be a series of barracks buildings. There's going to be like an administrative building in the middle, and I'm going to place down some training grounds. So you'll see in a minute, it's just like a basic field with a bunch of equipment. And yeah, we'll dive into that in just a second here. And I'm also going to include a link in the description for these barracks buildings here made by Spence! So yeah, I mean, if you're building a army base or any type of military institution, I'd say these buildings are pretty essential. They're really well detailed, they're fantastic. And, you know, I think it would be safe to say they would fit in with any type of military build that you guys may be building. And of course, no military base is complete without a whole bunch of storage and warehouses for all sorts of equipment. One thing that was kind of unfortunate, when I started looking for assets and props and whatever to build this specific creation, I remember in Timbuktu, when we were building the port area, I had found these really great props of, they were like these missile trailers. It was, well, I'm not even sure exactly what they were, but they were like these missiles that were mounted on like a truck trailer or something, and they were really great. And I kind of wanted to place these down a little bit all over the airport here. I mean, that would have been like a perfect setting for them. But I think that they have since been removed from the workshop, unfortunately. So I wasn't able to get my hands on those. But I mean, no big deal. I mean, there's an excess of different props and really nice things on the workshop that, you know, fit very well into a creation like this. But I mean, yeah. So moving on now, I'm going to build the entrance area for this base. Because it is a military base, of course, it's not going to be accessible to everybody, and there needs to be some level of protection for the base. So this entrance area is pretty fortified, and it may look kind of dilapidated, but the little backstory I have behind this area is that, you know, I mentioned in the beginning of this episode that this is an old World War II base, so a lot of buildings would have been like unused and just left to fall into disrepair over the years. So, you know, a lot of these buildings are going to have like broken windows and have all sorts of damage to them. But for the most part, I'm going to like keep the base semi-clean. There'll only be like a few sections here and there that might be in a little bit of disrepair. But I mean, I'm like actually really happy, guys, with the way that this is turning out so far, and you'll see at the end, like, I think it looks pretty decent for what it is. It's the first time that I've ever built anything military related apart from the naval base in Timbuktu, and I don't know, I think I did good. I think I did good here. You know, I don't like to brag or anything like that, but you know, I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out, and I'm actually really excited to build the passenger terminal of this airport too, just due to the fact that there are a lot of Soviet passenger planes on the workshop, to my surprise once again, and I'm a little bit more knowledgeable on that side of things. Like, you know, I'm more familiar with like the IL-86 and many of the Antonov and Ilyushin planes that were flying around during this period, so I'll probably be able to get something that's pretty accurate in that part of the airport too. And yeah, I mean, that's probably what we'll get into next episode, actually, is that part of the terminal. It's not going to be major, like, it's not going to be to the same scale of Timbuktu by any means. Obviously, air travel was even more rare in the Soviet Union than it already was in the States at that time. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, it was pretty popular in the late 70s in the States and in Europe and whatever, but like, air travel was just becoming more affordable, and it was kind of still in its infancy to what we know as air travel today. So anyways, I'm gonna reflect that in the next build. We'll have a couple of cool, we'll have a couple of really awesome Soviet airplanes in the next episode as well. So yeah, now I'm going to move on to the training area of the base. Nothing too complicated here. I'm just playing around with a whole bunch of different props. I've laid down a whole bunch of tires, and I wanted to make a huge like wooden wall obstacle that you often find on bases. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any that suited me, so I decided to go with these bridge pillars here, and they actually fit pretty nicely. I mean, because of their location, like you can obviously tell this is an army base, and because of that you can kind of assume that these wooden pillars here are some sort of training obstacle, and I find they look really well in this area. But yeah, I mean, apart from decorating the base and adding a few props, I am going to add some soldiers as well. I found a whole bunch of soldiers on the workshop. They are US soldiers, unfortunately, but from a distance you can't really tell. I mean, it basically looks like a person in camo holding a weapon, so you can pretty much assume that they're any type of military personnel. Alright guys, so for the last little bit of this episode, I'm going to spend time detailing the tarmac area of the airport. I felt it kind of looked a little bland. It needed something to bring some more life into it. So I'm going to use these dock platforms by Ronnie X. I've used them a ton in the past in Timbuktu and, it's the only series that I've used them in so far. Actually, no, I have used them in Tchenovstok in the port area, I believe. But anyways, these look really great in these types of settings. It gives like a nice concrete type texture to the ground. I'm going to do a little bit of work off camera as well. I'm going to place down a whole bunch of decals and stuff because in the Soviet days back then, runways were kind of in rough shape. And, with Tchenovstok being such a remote area, of course, it's harder to conduct maintenance and stuff to the pavement. So it's going to be left in some pretty rough shape in some places. So I'm going to be sure to place down a whole bunch of like potholes and cracks and a lot of like road damage to the ground. And all that's going to be done off camera. I didn't want to bore you guys too much with that because it was pretty tedious. But I mean, yeah, you guys know the gist of it anyways. Like, here's a little clip of me doing a little bit of detailing. So I'm gonna wrap it up right about now, guys, but stay tuned because I have lots of awesome cinematics coming up in just a moment here. So I will say that I'm super happy with the way this build turned out, and I can't wait to get started on the passenger terminal because I'm sure that's going to be just as much fun. And once that's done, I'm not sure what we're going to be moving on to in the Tchenovstok region, but I'm sure that that will lead to some pretty awesome projects in the near future. So yeah, that's it for me, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give it a good old thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel for many more videos like this to come out. And also be sure to check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support the channel further. And with all that being said, guys, until the next episode, please take care.